Hi, I'm Charlie Mato-Toyela with Blue Bear Flutes, and today we are going over our class lesson number 6, which is the alternate scales, minor blues scales. And as many of you probably know, and as I have mentioned, this is one of my favorite blues as well as styles of playing music. And of course, this is also one of my favorite things to do with the Native American flute. So this is certainly good for me, and I hope to make it as fun and enjoyable for you as well. We're going to go over the blues scale in just a minute. It is super easy. Don't fret it. There's really only one note that's any different than what you've learned already. And as always, I would like to remind you that if you go to my online class page on bluebearflutes.com, you can find the list of these scales. I have a couple of sheets here and there that you can pick up that'll show you the standard scale. And also this sheet has the note, which represents the hole that you cover up on that modern 6-hole flute right here where there's a missing fingering. You can play that on a 5-hole flute. Here's the tonic major, which we went over in the last class. Today's the blues, and the next class is going to be the chromatic, which a lot of you might fear the chromatic scale, and with good reason, I guess. But we'll go through it easy, and if you can find some use in it, that'll be fantastic for all of you seasoned musicians or people who want to play your favorite Christmas tunes. You'll find a lot of use in the chromatic scale. At least, as I always tell people, use it as a reference. I don't sit and play chromatically all day. That's no fun. So just give you a heads up on that. But anyway, today's scale is the blues scale, and first, as we always do with these classes, I would like to remind you, with a flute in hand, you need to practice holding the flute with your fingers covering the holes comfortably. And you need to make sure that your fingers are covering the holes, because if they're partially covering the holes, you may not produce the same quality tone as you would, or even the right notes for that matter, as if you cover them correctly. So keeping that in mind, how you hold the flute is so very important. And I know we go over this each and every class. It's a very good idea to practice this every opportunity that you get. You may sit and play the flute for a little while, and your hands may go stiff. You may be this, you may be that. You might feel like you're going to drop the flute. You may have gotten a new flute, and a new flute is definitely new to you. And when you try a flute with a different size fingering layout, you'll notice that your hands respond a little differently than they do whenever you have played the same flute for so long. So grab your flute, put your fingers on the holes, make sure that they feel like they're in there. Notice I'm not clamping down really tight. You don't want to do that. If you do clamp down too tight, you may once again get some hand strain. It takes a little getting used to, but that could happen. But anyway, you want to make sure that you cover the holes well enough that you can feel them under your fingers. And you want to make sure that your fingers, when you take them off of the holes, have a good, comfortable place to go and sit as you are playing the flute. So I always like to do this little exercise. As I've mentioned before, I'll pick a flute up, and I'm doing this right here the whole time, finding where the fingerings are. I like to slide my fingers up and down to fit into the fingering position there, and I can kind of feel it underneath of the pads of my fingers. So do that. You need to sit up as straight as you possibly can. It's always best if you breathe through your nose. You'll notice sometimes I breathe through my mouth, but through the nose is the way. And when you take a breath, exhale it through the flute. Go up the scale. Make sure you do it at a comfortable pace. Go back down the scale. You can start at the top. You're becoming more advanced. This is lesson 6, by the way, so you certainly have come a long ways. Feel free to use those techniques we've talked about. And switch them up. Like I said, a lot of people, that is the first song they play is the scale. So you can get the hang of that. Like I said, sitting up is very important if you can. Once again, those of you who may be unable to sit up properly, I can certainly understand that. I do have back problems, so it comes to me like that sometimes. But holding the flute properly, You'll see a lot of people in videos holding the flute out here. For me, if I'm going to play all day long, I can't do that because my arms will get tired. And I played in marching band for years in high school and played the trombone, so I had this thing in front of me like this all the time. When we went into attention and we held the trombone or trumpet or whatever we were playing at the time down like this, it was so much easier. It was so much less strain on my arms and my shoulders. So if you feel the need to make a video and you need to be playing out here for some reason to show everybody in the world that you're playing the flute, that is just fine. But I like to play comfortably, so make sure you do so as well, especially when you practice. And don't worry about being fast. As I've said before, fast will come. But practice, 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 and you'll find a lot of techniques just play themselves. So we are going to go over, like I say, the blues scale. I would like to let you know that on my website you can actually download this backing tracks. Actually, if you go to Blue Bear Flutes, this is the mobile version of it right here. You can go to bluebearflutes.com. About 2/3 of the way down the page, after you get past the PDFs and a couple of videos of mine, you'll find this little video player, audio player here. And when you get to that, you'll notice it says Billy Blues A75. Then you'll see Billy Blues A101. And then you'll see Billy Blues D75, D101, E75, E101. That's based on what key your flute is in. I put most of the basic keys that flutes are in on here. There may be a key, and I do apologize if your key is not in there. There's a way actually to play along with it with these particular keys if your flute is in a different scale. There's a way to do that. We'll talk about that in the future. But the 101 and 75 is the speed. So that's 75 BPM, 101 BPM. 101 is, of course, faster. 75 is slower. Just to give you an example, too, we'll go ahead and play the E 101 for Billy Blues here. And this is just on my phone, so nothing really special here, but gives you kind of an idea of what it sounds like. It's a little fast. And you can go back to the 75. Has a nice lead in, so you got time to take a break. That's, I think, the speed that they would call Mississippi blues, but that's not what we're going to use right now. We're actually going to use one of our Blue Bear Flutes amplifiers because it's convenient right here, a little bit louder than my phone. But you have those available for you. There's also TFD, A minor, D minor, E minor, and G minor. And we'll talk about those in one of our upcoming lessons, actually. So you'll get to hear playing some of that type of music along down the road. But there they are for you. You can actually download them from the website if you want to put them on a USB, if you have one of our amps or another device that you want to play it on, or if you want to be able to keep them on your phone without using the internet. There's a lot of great options and reasons to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my amp on right now, and I'll show you what we're working with here. It automatically plays the 75 speed. So very conveniently, let's see, I'll go ahead and pause this. You'll notice, actually I think I skipped to the next one. We have a way around that. Very conveniently, you'll notice that I played along with it as if I've been practicing this song. To be honest with you, I have only played this song a handful of times with my other classes, and I probably should sit and play this, but once you get the hang of the blues, you know, you may have seen people or heard of people or have an idea somehow or another how we get these ideas. You may have experienced someone walking up on stage with a blues band they've never played with before. This is why this can happen, because if you're familiar with the scale, the style of music, and you're in the right key, you're good to go. I've done it myself. So, but just to show you what we're working on here, this is all holes covered. So all holes covered, you have all the fingerings, 5 fingerings that are all filled in. This one is uncovered, and you'll notice there's not a 6th hole here, but if you feel the need to have a 6th fingering, just remember to keep it covered up all the time. Unless it's one of our 6-hole flutes, in which case just don't play the top hole and pretend it's a 5-hole flute. Which most of your 6-hole flutes, if that's what you're using, that's what they are. So you have this fingering covered up all the time if you're playing a modern 6-hole flute, one that another flute maker made, and then all other fingerings covered up. And you'll notice all the way across, there's no need to uncover that fingering. In the blues scale, it doesn't really work too well anyway. So all covered. This is where we uncover the bottom fingering, the bottom 2 fingerings. This is what I like to call the blues note. It's the note that is different in the minor pentatonic scale from the minor pentatonic blues scale. So this is the one note, and it's correct on most flutes, like 99% of them or more. What you'll do is you'll uncover the bottom hole, cover the next hole, and uncover the 3rd from the bottom hole. And basically the next step is uncovering the 3 bottom holes, the 4 bottom holes. Remember, if you have that extra fingering right there, I'm going to go ahead and draw 2 just as a placeholder on these, or at least this one. If you have that 6th fingering right there, just do the same thing you've been doing, keeping it covered up. So that's the 4 fingerings, not concerning ourselves with that 6th fingering, and then this is uncovering all the fingerings. Now, there are other blue notes or blues notes in the scale that you can play. They're not in the typical minor pentatonic blues scale, but once you get the hang of it, you can kind of feel where they're at, and you can play some chromatic stuff. I mean, the blues is pretty free and open, so you can actually throw in what we're learning on our next class, the chromatic scale. You can throw in 1 or 2 of those chromatic notes, because technically that's what any of this is anyway. I mean, this is really just a portion of the chromatic scale. So I'll show you here, all covered, just like this. The next, remove the bottom fingering. The next, bottom 2 fingerings. And then right here, uncover this one, cover that one. And then the bottom 3. And then right here, pretend that black hole there just doesn't exist. Even if you have a 6-hole flute, keep it covered with leather or your finger or whatever you use, and then uncover that 4th fingering from the bottom. This is the only one covered, and then uncover all of them. So. That's all there is to it. If you don't know that scale, but you know the regular, you're not going to mess up. You can actually play along with the blues with just the notes that actually are on the flute. You can use this extra fingering, and like I say, there are actually a couple of others I might throw in there in just a second, but you can use that extra fingering and give yourself a little edge. It's a little, it's a little something more. It's that one little piece of oregano that you threw in that pasta. It's a little bit more flavor to your performance. Once you get the hang of it and you've got it down pat, that's when you want to start looking for other notes that you can throw in there with it. And I'll tell you, with the blues, there are notes that you can throw in there that clash with the whole scale, and it still sounds awesome. So don't forget that. I'm going to turn this back on and play with it, and I'm going to show you something about blues progressions. Now, you don't have to be able to read music, and you don't have to be a professional musician, because so many people tell me, well, I've never played an instrument before. Well, this is the easiest instrument in the world. And right now, my goal is to give you a key that you can unlock a whole new world. and that's this blues scale. Like I say, it's something that just is dear to me, something I really enjoy, have played a lot of my life, and really enjoy listening to, enjoy playing, and I probably should give you a bit of a history lesson. I know I had mentioned in some previous lessons, and of course on our regular channel videos here on YouTube, that the blues is actually of Native American and African American descent. The blues was actually something that was kind of born from struggles and difficulties and rhythms and tones that was already a cooperative thing going on between those cultures, and eventually made it into mainstream music. And the blues, like I say, is it's very worth looking into if you're kind of a history buff or interested in that kind of thing, or just want to know more about it. It's worth looking into. There's a lot of good information out there, and I'm not going to say it's all completely correct, but in my experience of browsing the internet for the last so many years, it's probably the most correct thing I've ever seen on the internet. So it's worth looking into. I'm going to turn this back on, and then we'll talk about, like I say, how I knew to change with some of the notes here. And I may not play the same as I did a moment ago. We're on the faster song now. At that time. I never read the sing upside down, so please forgive me. But anyway, as you noticed, I kind of know what to play along with it. After hearing this song the first time, it's kind of simple, and you'll make up something completely different. I mean, when you improv, which is what we're doing here, when you improv, you actually create your own melody. And I like to create a melody that both fits in with the backing track or the harmony or whatever you want to call it. I like to create a melody that'll fit in with that, and that gives me the opportunity to highlight what it is I'm doing and make my own version of it. You know, come up with my own style. So I can play along, and I can also play along in my way, and then kind of stand out sometimes. So the slower version is easier for beginners, I promise you. And notice I don't always start right at the beginning. You can, but you don't have to. Most good soloists come in somewhere in the measure, which is what we're doing here. You really can't go wrong either. If I were to back this up, you'll see that you can come in and play from top notes, bottom notes, middle notes. Notice I'm landing on a note. The note that you land on is important. The best way for you to practice this, and for me it's a little difficult to practice this, but for a beginner, unless you're, a skilled blues player, this should be pretty easy for you. Play a note. I'm imagining which parts of this backing track that note sounds best with. I even changed the tone of my voice to match this backing track. I can't stop myself. That bottom note goes with most everything. Let's try the next note. It goes along with all of it too, but if you noticed, where I came in at instinctively, where I came in at was where that note sounded the best. I'll do it again. That's the clashing part of the riff. Another clashing part, but it still sounds good with it. Clashing, like I say, lets you stand out. Here we go. This is where it belongs right here. See, that actually goes in tune with the music. Let's go to the next note. I skipped one. Just go up the scale, play along with it, see where it feels like it belongs. Now right there, that's a real tiny clash. It's basically some sub-harmony that just doesn't necessarily fit, but that don't mean you shouldn't play it. And when the music changes to the next harmony, when it changes up to the next part of the harmony, that's a good time for you to transition. So when you're playing the blues, or playing along with the blues with your Native American flute, when you hear that scale going up, then it starts to go down. Actually, we have lines of up and down at the same time, but you can kind of pick out what works for you. Going up. I'll turn it up just a pinch. Listen to this transition. You can even do this with 2 fingers. These notes, because they're the top of the arpeggio of the minor scale here that we're in E. The top of the arpeggio actually match with everything in the whole song. You really can't go wrong. So there's 3 notes right there, 2 fingerings that you can play along with everything in this backing track. When you get bored, just 1 more note. I can't stop myself. That bottom note always sounds like a good place to land. So I'll pause it again, and I'll show you a couple of the easy things that I was doing just to make this so simple for you. Like I said, one thing you can do is play the top 2 fingerings on your flute. That's 3 notes that you can play with everything in that backing track. Typically, you can play those 3 notes with everything in any blues music. You can, well, I take that back. Not any blues music. There is major blues. We don't want to go there. You can't really play, let's see, oh gosh, I hate limiting people. You can play the Native American flute in major blues. However, that's advanced skill set type stuff, and a lot of the greats, I can't say even most, because there's 2 or 3 really good ones that play in major blues, and it's just not me. Some of my favorites too. I mean, Johnny Cash would play major blues. It's just not me. But with this instrument, you can play in minor blues. So if you have an A Native American flute that's in the key of A minor, you can play along with the A minor blues backing track that we have on Blue Bear Flute's online class page. Go down to the bottom, like say about halfway or 2/3 of the way to the bottom. You'll find the backing tracks. You can download them, play along with them on the website, however is convenient for you. But when you have an A minor flute, you'll play with the A minor backing track. When you have a G minor flute, you'll play with the G minor backing track. And if you want to go to those last couple of tracks that I had on there, I showed you just now. Of course, by the time you see this video, there may be more on there. But if you want to go to those, absolutely feel free to go ahead and play along with them. They are much more advanced. It's something for fun that we'll talk about once again in another one of our lessons here. So if you want to get the best free online lessons to playing the Native American flute, this is a good place to start anyway. I don't know of any others, and I'm not challenging you guys to go out and make your own, whatever works, but I do have a deal of experience. I'm not bragging. I just want to make sure I share what I can with you and give you all that I possibly can in these lessons. So starting, like I say, with what we've done here, you can play just the top 2 fingerings, and you can use some techniques. That's just it's a trill with some flutes. It's just basically going up and down really fast on that note. That would get really old after a while, but if you do it once, it sounds pretty cool. How you play those notes, as we've discussed, that's so important. This instrument has basically 5 notes. I mean, granted, our instruments that we make at Blue Bear Flutes play probably 13 or more notes plus chromatic. However, in the minor pentatonic scale, you have 5 notes. And the minor pentatonic blues scale, technically you have 6 notes, but there's 7 up here, and I know somebody's going to get me on that, but that's because this one is the same as this one. This is 1 octave here. This is the bottom version of the note, and this is the top version of the note. And if your Native American flute's made like this, or if you have a 6-hole flute that you've been instructed to keep that hole covered all the time, that's how it'll play. If you uncover all the holes except for that one that you have been instructed to keep covered all the time. So that's an octave. So we have these notes to work with, and that's really it. That's all you really need. We can come up with more. Like I said, there are other blues notes. That's all chromatic stuff, but let me show you. Start it all over again. Like I said, there's so much you can do. It's all style. That's all it is. Feel free to play the scale along with it. Just play along, play in the scale top to bottom. Take your time. This is 75 BPM, so you've got all the time in the world. Play 1 note, play the next note. Find out where it sounds like it's actually fitting in. That's all you have to do. Or do the 2-finger flute. That's all there is to it. Play those 2 fingerings, and with those 3 notes, you can't go wrong. You really can't. You're going to get so tired of hearing just those 3 notes that you're going to say, I've got to throw something in there, and then you'll do it instinctively. It's like riding a bicycle, I promise you. I stand by it. The Native American flute is the easiest instrument in the entire world to play. You can make it as complex as you like. However, the basics of it is really the easiest instrument, in my opinion, to play, even easier than the drum, because there are people who don't have rhythm, they say. And I know a lot of drummers that say most everybody doesn't have rhythm. That's a good thing about the blues is you don't really have to have perfect rhythm. If you listen closely, I don't play in time necessarily with all the music. So you'll notice too, one other thing that people in the blues especially try to do is not always play the same thing. Play it once, that is great. Remember what you played so that you can play it again another time or when that piece of the music comes back around. But don't get stuck in that one idea, that one system of doing things. Notice I didn't even really cover that hole enough to make a note out of it. But you can kind of feel it, especially in the music, you can feel it. You hear that? It's a transition that I did, but it was only that much of a note change. So it is super easy, and like I say, something that I feel like you'll really grow to enjoy playing the blues on the Native American flute. Here at Blue Bear Flutes, there was a time in the past when I used to even put a fingering in the back so that blues players could play that. And I thought it was a good idea at the time, but I decided not to improve on what was original and kept it this way and just kind of remembered how to play that note. It's not that difficult. It's like remember to keep your finger covered on those 6-hole flutes. But anyway, so that's basically the blues scale. I do like to end this reminding you that in this next lesson, we're going to be doing the alternative scales, the chromatic scale, and how to use it, how to employ that scale. Now, you may think, when will I ever employ the blues scale outside of playing with a backing track or playing the blues? There's a lot of times you will. So, I'm not playing the blues now. So you may find a reason to play that note. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because when we get to the chromatic scale, I'm going to show you a lot of that. Places that you can play Native American sounding music, I guess I should say, Native American style music, that's a good way to put it. When you're going to be playing that, and you'll find a use for that chromatic scale. Ask any professional modern 6-hole flute player, and they'll tell you, oh, you have to graduate to that note, or I use all the fingerings. I hear it, oh gosh, as a flute maker, I hear this stuff all the time. I use all the fingerings, and I have a place for that note. Yeah, I do too. But honestly, no, you'll find a use for that note, as well as all the other chromatic notes. On a modern 6-hole flute, that is a chromatic note. It is not in place with the minor pentatonic scale. And with that flute, if you've been told, or if you found out on your own, or anything, that you have to keep that hole covered to make it sound like a Native American flute, then that's just a chromatic note. It's one note. And we have so many notes on this flute that we can play, as well as that one, and so many others like it that just, you think, what am I going to play? That doesn't sound very Native American. That's what I'm saying. But you'll find a place for it, really. There's places for all this, and especially if you want to play Christmas music, Halloween music, pop culture music, anything that's in a major scale, there's a reason to know these alternative scales. And we'll get into that. And we'll be talking about playing slow, which is super, super important. We'll talk about major transitioning in the next video. We'll talk about the wash off. That's my term for, and I guess it's kind of a blues player's term, even though we're not in the blues at that point. The wash off is how you play these notes and how you make it come full circle to sounding right. You know, if you're playing a chromatic note with a Native American style music, you want to make that not sound, you know, like I was playing just now, really, and for lack of a better word, I mean, Pythagoras is the one that came up with these crazy notes to begin with, Greek. So you don't want to make it sound like a major scale or a chromatic scale or a Greek scale or that kind of music. You want it to sound like Native American music. So I'll show you a wash-off technique that'll help you bring that, like I say, in to where you can use it. And we'll also talk about a slow grace note, which is something that is kind of cool too. So we'll talk about those things. So remember that. As always, make sure that you practice your scale, practice sitting up, practice breathing. Breathing is so incredibly important, especially in these days when we've had lots of things going on in the world, things that if you knew how to breathe, I think to myself, if they only knew how to breathe, we'd be okay. So it reminds me of that waiting to exhale, but it's more like waiting to inhale, I think, to breathe. Anyway, learning how to breathe is very important, and you do it with practice. Most people think I just breathe and yeah, that's it. But no, you need to practice breathing. You need to do it well. Make sure that you sit up and make sure that you, I mean, that's a deep breath right there. Fill your lungs completely. That is so important. And what allows me the ability, if any of you have seen my other videos or even my other lessons, the thing that allows me to talk for so long is my ability to breathe. And I breathe a lot. So practice all these things and make sure that you set this down when you get an opportunity. It's good to do that. You'll miss it. I promise you, you will. I know I do, but I get to play them all day long in the shop, so we're making flutes. But set it down when you get a chance. Think about it. Think about it. Give yourself an opportunity to kind of long for that. Don't set it down for too long. Don't forget about it. Oh my gosh, don't forget about it. And enjoy it. That's the most important thing. Well, this class is over. I hope you all have enjoyed it and got something very useful out of it. Make sure that you download the scale sheets if you haven't. We've talked about that a lot. Feel free to download the class curriculum if you want to see what we're going over. A lot of good habits in there, things that might show up in some book down the road or something. Actually, the book is on its way, and you guys will be able to see that as well. So practice the blues scale. Like I said, only one real major difference in notes here. And download those backing tracks. They're free. There's no charge on that. You can check them out and enjoy them. Just play them on my website if you want to download them. That's fine. You can play them through your phone or through your computer or whatever you've got going on and enjoy it. So make sure you always do that. Take care. And Charlie Mato-Toyela for Blue Bear Flutes signing out. We'll see you again very soon.